My man, Chad, how you doing, man? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Been a pleasure. It's funny that it's been a while since we first touched base about a podcast now. And the first time we didn't even meet, the first time I even knew who you were is at a Jordan Syatt in New York City. He was doing a little seminar with
Joe DeFranco.
DeFranco.
You were there, yeah?
Yeah, I recognized you.
Okay.
I had just gotten into the online scene or whatever, and I was like, I think I know that guy. I think I follow that guy on Instagram. And so good to connect now. But I recall that day, and I told my fiance, then girlfriend, and I remember saying it to her, and she was like, "Oh, who you podcasted today?" I was like, we went to that thing with Jordan Syatt, DeFranco, whatever. I don't even remember what the hell they talked about, whatever. But whatever, that's like it's a full circle moment for sure. And before I ask, I want to get you to just give a little intro and tell us all what you're up to, because I know you've been traveling quite a bit. Is that I think I'll give your intro right now. Is I think that as coaches, like the best thing we can hear is that when we make content, like the best comment I can ever get is, "Oh my God, you're in my head," right? Or like, "Wow, you're in my head."
Totally.
And it's something that I like when I get that, because, it's not that I like that, like I'm trying to be in people's head, but with you and your content, like, I think it is very obvious that it's just a lot of repurposed content that you have of conversations that you have with clients. So what I'm trying to say is very clear that if you follow you and you listen to your whatever content that you put out, it's very clear that you work with people, and that this is not like theory, this is practice. And so I just wanted to say that's something I've observed from your content since I started following you, and I really appreciate that.
That's beautiful. Yeah, there isn't too much client research going on my end. Content research going on my end. It's usually straight out of the conversation. So it's cool you say that.
Yeah. Cool. Give people background on just who you are, how you got the classic, how you got into the space, but also what you're doing now, because I know you're in South America.
Yeah. Yeah, let's start off. I mean, I'm a fitness and nutrition coach from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and I've been at it for about 6 years. And the short spiel on how I got into it, I mean, I got into the gym and nutrition and dieting and weight loss around 14, 15 years old, the way a lot of us do around high school time. And the way I explain it is I found every way to screw it up for about 10 years before figuring it out. I found the right people online. I educated myself a little bit more, and it just sort of broke into the content space online. And like you said before, I just basically wrote about my struggles, and they happen to be the struggles that a lot of people have, and there was some relatability there. And I don't really see too many situations anymore from clients that I haven't seen in my own life, but that tends to help me out on the coaching side of things. These days, I've been traveling around. I was in Mendoza, Argentina, which is Napa Valley of Argentina. I was there for a wedding for some old high school friends, and I kind of balked at the price of the trip home. It was about like $1,200 to get home. It was about $600 to get there. So I said, screw it, I'll just wait it out. And then I got to Buenos Aires after Mendoza for about within about a day, I decided that I would stay for about a month. And then about a week later, I said, why do I only have to stay a month? And here we are about, what are we? Nearing 2 months. So the plan is to go home. I have a bachelor party in Vegas in late June. We'll see if I can handle it. I'm in Medellin right now in Colombia, which is, I'm not as stoked to be here as I was in Buenos Aires, but we got to let it play out a little bit.
I was just in Cartagena for a friend's bachelor party, and
beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful is definitely the word. What is it about Medellin that isn't striking you as a place you'd stay compared to Buenos Aires?
It's less about, like, I haven't had enough time to to get a good taste of here.
I have a big Colombian listenership, so you're gonna get a lot. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh yeah,
no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Watch your tone. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
I was worried about that.
Yeah.
No, but it's less about what it's like here and more about how much I liked it in Argentina and Buenos Aires. I went through Patagonia. Buenos Aires is probably the nicest big city I've ever been to.
High praise.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's manners is the one, like the biggest praise I'd give them is just the amount that they are so kind and their manners are so good. And every interaction I had a language barrier, obviously. Like there isn't much English there, not much English here, but always really happy to help. They always went out of their way. I was never a bother. Whereas here, not to put Colombia down, for the listeners, but it feels a little bit more like home.
Well said.
Where from a big city back home, everyone's in a rush. So here, I'm less of a novelty here.
Yeah, after leaving Cartagena, like a couple weeks later, I went to Mexico City for some time with friends, and I don't know if you've been or spent any time there, and I felt a similar contrast, and maybe it was the context of the trips, where Cartagena was like bachelor party, and this was a bit different trip in Mexico City. But I left Cartagena feeling like, okay, this was beautiful place to vacation. We had a great time, but coming back from Mexico City, I like felt very strongly. Maybe it was just, again, the context of the trip, but I felt very strongly. I was like, I could totally live there. Like I could have, I want to go with like a romantic fell in love comment, but it was awesome. And I was like, I totally underrated it and felt a stark difference there. So sorry, Colombia is getting wrecked right now on the podcast, but that's just, I know what you mean. Where like when I left Mexico City, I was like, oh, this was like, I could have stayed. I mean, I've had some of those like fleeting thoughts of like, quality of life, it looked high, and I'm sure I'm sure it depends on where you are and all that stuff.
Oh, totally.
But yeah, no, I get
it's less about Colombia, more about how much praise I have.
Did you spend time in Patagonia? That's like for me, like we try and do like a big hiking trip, my guy friends and I.
Oh yeah.
And so Patagonia's been on like the wish list for a while.
I mean, most people in Argentina don't even get down there. So it's a ways. I had a girl that I was dating while I was there, and I just said like I might not be down here again, so I got to do it. And we just kind of booked I was down there for a week, so through El Chalten and El Calafate, which are kind of two main hubs in Patagonia, and then I spent 3 weeks in Bariloche alone, which is, depends on who you talk to, is not Patagonia, but it's kind of like the doorway into Patagonia.
Cool. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Definitely a special place. Definitely on the old bucket list.
Yeah.
All right. So let's pivot. We'll talk some fitness stuff here. The first time around we were going to have this podcast, I don't remember when it was, but it was a long time ago, and we booked something.
Like a year. Yeah.
Yeah, we booked something, and I made notes for that day. And when I was like thinking about what we were going to talk about, I was like, let me just see what I was like planning on talking about then. And what I had done is I just wrote down a bunch of tweets that you had tweeted, and I thought I would just read them back to you, and that they would serve as a nice jumping off point. And I think that they will. This isn't like we're not canceling you. Yeah, we're not canceling you. You're gonna be good. The first one I'll read, and we can just talk about kind of what I mean, whatever if you can reference exactly the time in which you had this exact thought, or we can just have a general discussion. But the first tweet was, please stop getting down on the scale every day and hoping. Please stop getting on the scale every day and hoping it goes down. You'll be disappointed about 50% of the time. And I think that's not. You don't need to. That's not a riddle. Like that's a pretty straightforward tweet. But we could talk a little bit about what you meant by that.
Well, I think that people, I always tell people like, don't get on the scale with your fingers crossed, and I think that's what people do. I mean, I've done the scale myself for many years, so I understand the psychology of how people jump onto it, and it's always like this like coin flip, like, is it going to be lower today? Is it going to be lower today? And the truth is it's not going to be lower every day. It's just like, we just know that it's not going to go down a pound every day, and it's not going to go down 0.1 pound every day. And if you have that hope, the big problem with that is, if you hope it's going to go down because, let's say, you had a good few days or something, or you feel like you deserve it and you're right, what's the benefit of that? You're going to continue following your plan because you're now more motivated. So all the benefit you got from that was you're more motivated to follow a plan that you had already assumed you're going to follow. The downside, 50-ish% of the time, is it's not going to go down. And what's the downside of that? Especially if you think you deserved for it to go down. So now you're like, I'm due, it's going to go down. You get on it, it goes up. You feel like you've been, screwed by the scale. You've now lost motivation because you had it in your head that it's supposed to go down because you deserve it, and you deserve it eventually, just maybe not today. And the downside of that is you're now less motivated to follow a plan you had assumed you would follow. So all that happens by this game that is totally irrelevant and useless. I mean, what the scale says tomorrow is irrelevant, but what it says next week and the weeks following do matter. You've just kind of hinged your adherence, which we both know is like the most important thing. That people fail diets because they don't follow them, not because they're necessarily doing the wrong thing. You've kind of hinged your adherence and your consistency and your motivation on something that doesn't actually matter. So we need to try and get away from that.
I think that there's things that I would reiterate about that. Number one is that that's not an exaggeration statistically. Like that's not we're not 50%. I don't think is unrealistic. I think that that's true. I think if you spend every single day, if you spend 100% of days in a deficit, scale probably goes down about 50% of the days. And so that's 50% of the days you're pissed off, even with 100% adherence. And essentially what you said was what I think about this as well, is that like the amount of happiness you receive from it going down is a fraction of the amount of pissed off you feel when it is not down. And so that, when we take that algorithm and apply it to a 50% of the time it doesn't go down, you end up with a net feeling of, this is not working, instead of, and again, the answer to that is some combination of understanding this as a fact and just decrease or just shifting your expectations. And also potentially in a change of strategy, which is like, I've incorporated sometimes the idea of like acquiring the data daily, but not looking at it in some ways. So like using the Bluetooth capacity of the scale. And so it's been like an interesting thing of like, could you get on, count to 10 and get off? So we get the data because the data can be helpful in the use of our like averages and stuff. But the actual, what the scale actually says on that day isn't changing what you're going to then go do this day. And so the more you can derail or decrease the amount of potential hurdles, and the more you'd be able to actually stick with something long enough to see if it works. And so, yeah, I agree with you on that one.
What do you like? You can get on the scale and not see the number?
You could put a piece of tape over it. Yeah. So you put like a Post-it over it. And
I use like a Bluetooth. Okay.
And use a Bluetooth. And then once a week you'd load it up and it would give you, in a perfect world, it'd be a setting that the scale had, because and the thing is, there's this psychological argument of like avoidance versus exposure. Right. And so like, there's some, do I want to completely avoid that? Do I want to do some exposure therapy? Like there's a benefit and time and place for both. I think like just saying, hey, the answer to this is just to not look at all. It's like, okay, I think that in some context, that's a great idea. And I think in other contexts, like facing it and being like, like I should be able to look and also not get derailed, that also has merit.
Yeah, I think if we know it's too far gone and the person needs off of it, then you take them off it, because at some point it becomes too much of a problem. But I mean, there's no way in hell I could ever agree with someone that says that the fact you're scared of the scale is an okay thing. I mean, we shouldn't be afraid of our body weight.
Yeah. We shouldn't just avoid that as a something that we're going to accept. Oh yeah, or you're going to be afraid of this forever.
Yeah.
All righty, let's move on to the next one. I got how many I wrote down? Dude, I wrote down 7 tweets. You're fucked.
I should tweet out.
The second one is, I haven't even read these literally until just now. Normally I had a call right up until we got on here, and I normally like, I'm pretty diligent. Like I'll look it over. I'll like make sure that I'm like, as a host, that I'm like ready. Yeah. This is Jordan 1 year ago with no proofreading at all today. So we're hopping right in. Tweet number 2.
Okay, cool.
If you keep lifting weights when you aren't losing weight, you're building muscle, right? So, okay, let me reread this like a non-idiot here. If you keep lifting weights when you aren't losing weight, you're building muscle, right? And muscle is half of toning. Many of you quit while you're succeeding. You just use the wrong scoreboard.
Yeah. I definitely did write that one. It's another. Yeah, I talk about the scale a ton. I think it's the most hidden reason why a lot of people fail at weight loss, is just not understanding what's going on with that thing. But what I mean by that is, whether people think they should be losing weight or not, if let's say you go 3 or 4 weeks and the scale doesn't actually go down, it means you're eating a little bit more than you think you are. which means you're actually in a better spot to add muscle than you were when you were actually losing weight. So either way, you're progressing forward towards your goal, because I don't know about you. And I mean, being a hypertrophy coach, I mean, chances are you deal with mostly clients who don't think they have enough muscle. So, and even in a fat loss situation, like most of my clients are, most of them don't have enough muscle to look the way they want to once they lose their 10, 20, 30 pounds anyway. So it's tough, because they will, even if they've been told many times the scoreboard is the scale and their timeline is the scale. This is just me trying to non-scale victories in a really indirect way. I mean, let's get stronger. I mean, you're not strong enough to look the way you want. So, and I tend to tell people their timeline should be more made. Like, if you're not able to do push-ups off the floor, or a chin up or something like that, and if you are at a reasonable body weight, or just all these strength standards we can have, you're going to end up looking frail and skinny before you end up looking toned. So let's try and focus on the strength as well as the weight loss.
Yeah, I feel like weight training is the hedge. It's like, if you're trying to lose fat, but you're weight training the whole time and you fail at your goal of losing fat, what you've probably done is like it makes the worst case scenario still a good outcome. I think weight training is just the hedge that it makes the floor of what could conceivably happen still a net benefit. And so, like,
yes,
it's just so important. If you have the worst fat loss phase and you gain weight, sounds like a really great period of muscle building. You know what I mean? And so it really just like decreases. It's such a reframe, and especially even more like the tweet is in a particular context of like someone who's hopefully through acknowledgement with the coach, like acknowledge that they have two goals. They need both more muscle and less fat than they have right now. And so it is a two-pronged approach, and it is, while they can be done at the same time, technically, the idea that you would, not be doing so great at one of them means you're probably doing great at the other one, means at all times you can just, man, if we can just decrease the overall feeling of like consequences with this whole thing and decrease just like people give it so much emotional power. And it's like, hey, if we can reframe this, like, okay, we had this goal for the last 4 months, we were trying to lose weight, but maybe we haven't lost a lot of weight. Guess what you've done? You've done a great, like, quote, recomp phase of like, you've built some, if you're relatively new to training, that is a muscle building period of time. That is not like a net neutral. That is a great period of time that was a goal that you also need to accomplish at some point. So we're still chipping away going forward,
You're providing a better foundation, add muscle tone later. Yeah, it's and it's also just like we need as many benefits and things to focus on away from just weight loss for people, because that one's sometimes a little bit more confusing, a little bit more of a life change. But I don't know about you, but I'm a lot more excited to go into the gym when I'm just trying to do an extra rep compared to last week, or an extra 5 pounds. It's like, it makes it fun. I was in my gym the other day. I got to change my program, which kind of screwed me up, and I couldn't sit there and like put out my numbers and I did a little bit more than last week or whatever. It was kind of annoying, but we gotta focus on more than just weight loss.
What's the gym situation like down there? I didn't get a chance to explore a lot of gyms.
Colombia is pretty good, actually. There's I've only been in one of them. There's a big athletic gym. It's less friendly than the one in Argentina, but machines, free weights and stuff. It's a little grungy, but like, I like that. There's some nicer ones down the other way. I haven't been in those. The gyms in Argentina were like dumbbells up to 40 max. Like, I had to get a little bit more creative. Machines were like, so it's good, but like, I go back to Toronto, and I'm sure your situation in Austin, it's just like we get whatever we want out there.
No,
so it's
sure.
like,
You come across any like I feel like when you're in places, whatever, just maybe places that are less up to the normal American modern standard of equipment, that you run into the occasional like really great machine that just like has been thrown out 10 times, is like full of rust, but it's just like was made so long ago, and you're just like, wow, this hack squat or this leg press or this weird machine that I haven't seen. Have you come up against any of that? Have you seen any of that?
I've no, what I've mostly seen is like half broken machines.
Oh, okay.
So like a hammer strength row or something, but like only one side is like working. So yeah, it's been
they really emphasize unilateral training down there, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
Big
that's
on
exactly.
unilateral work. Yeah.
I've had to with only 42-pound dumbbells. I've had to be high on the Bulgarian split squats.
What's your so okay? So I don't know if you do your own programming or what, but how have you managed that whilst not only traveling but being in a place that's got fucking language barrier and just like not as modern in the sense of like obsession with fitness like our country? Like how have you programmed for yourself?
It's well, it's been interesting. I mean, we can break into that. I've been doing like a documenting my weight loss while I've been going through this, while I've been growing through here.
On
So
Instagram?
yeah,
Okay.
so I've been taking daily pictures on my stories and showing people that. And after a couple of months of traveling where I wasn't really paying attention, you get a little flabby, but creates for a better story, I guess. But the programming has been, I basically just take what I'm doing back home and whatever needs to change based on equipment needs, like lower dumbbells, or they don't have this machine, and just try and find a substitute. But it's been the hardest thing has just been I live beside gyms back home. I mean, the farthest I have to walk to a gym is like 8 minutes. When I'm in Toronto. Here, when I was in Bariloche, I had 45 minutes to walk to the gym, 45 and back. So I was getting my steps in. It made weight loss a little bit easier, but the gym here is what are we talking? I mean, 20-minute walk. It seems shorter every time I do it, so it's not too bad. But it's been all right. I mean, at this point, when you have this kind of training knowledge, you kind of everything's the same. I mean, I like heavier weights. I like some machines. I don't like having to slow my tempos necessarily all the time, or do pauses, or can't do this, so I've got to do more lunges. But it's good for you.
Yeah, it's a good challenge for the just like to fall back on the basic principles of hypertrophy of like I only have 40-pound dumbbells, which means more reps, a pause, and a real reliance on like, hey, if I go close to failure, like that's really what matters. And I probably wouldn't want to do that for long term. Like you said, I don't want to live in like the north of 20 rep range forever, but
Yeah.
fall back on movement patterns. You're like, I really had a chest supported row machine programmed here. It's like, okay, like I can manage. And I think that's a fun problem to like, that's a fun problem solving endeavor. But,
Yeah.
I think for the long term, maybe, you're like, hey, that's not something I want to do forever. But
Yeah.
in the short term, it can be fun to modify.
Well, I mean, I just think about, when I have to do that for clients or something, and I just go like, oh, like, it's okay. Like, we'll just find that switch. And then like in the back of my head, I'm like, I hope you like that. And then I'm over there just like crying like a baby, like, oh, I hate this shit. Like,
I know.
I have my preferences too.
Yeah. People in my group sometimes will say like, if they've maxed out, let's say they're at Planet Fitness maybe, and they've maxed out the dumbbells for RDLs. And I'm like, okay, just, you can do more reps, no problem. And I'm like it rolls off the tongue for me, cause I know physiologically that makes sense, but like, that blows if you're like, yeah, I'm got to do like 15 plus rep RDL sets, which is
you're terrible. Grip's done.
Yeah. Cardio's gone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about nutrition out there? Have you I mean, you're not. It's not like you're like fucking prepping for a bodybuilding show. We're not like trying. You're not like out, traveling South America, like trying to stick to the most optimal nutrition. But like, what challenges have you faced?
So, in the month leading
Argentina's
up,
got crazy steaks and stuff, right? I feel like they've just got like crazy meat.
Yeah,
right?
don't that's the one shot I'll take at Argentina. I heard there was the best meat in the world, and I don't know if I didn't get the best meat in the world. I don't know if I went to the wrong places, but what I will say, it was the cheapest meat in the world. So it was, you can get God, I was eating it for less than $5, drinking
we
full
felt
meals.
that way in Colombia too. We went to like an Argentinian steakhouse, and I was like, bro, we're getting a fillet for like $6 or something.
Yeah. So leading up, like now I'm paying more attention. I'm in kitchens. I'm actually like, I've got a food scale and stuff like that. So I practically like I'm getting in front of the mirror for people every day. So I'm actually I'm taking this pretty serious. But the hardest thing was bread at every dinner out. So, and I'm like, if you put me in a lower calorie state around a couple of glasses of wine, and then like bread that they just bring back to you every time you finish it, it's an all you can eat bread situation. So that led to a pretty soft before picture that I put up there a couple of weeks ago. But other than that, the language barrier is tough. In Patagonia, the vegetable situation in Patagonia was just basic, and that's the kindest way I can put it. I was pretty much living off tomatoes and trying to find spinach when it was there, but that was basically it. And the vegetables looked pretty rough.
You
Which
weren't
probably
shitting
not
at all.
surprised.
I get it. No shits were had. I get you.
Yeah, no comments. So, but the nice thing about it was I went into the grocery store every day and just felt like I wasn't paying anything for it. So, there was just this like, total lack of stress from buying food that like, I go back to Toronto right now. I don't even want to talk about what the grocery bills are back there right now. But other than that, it's been not so bad socially, so I don't have to worry too much about that. I got to look for people right now. I've got a buddy that I got to meet up with this weekend, but it's not like I'm going out or anything like that. So I'm pretty much in control of my food. But the grocery stores here are quite good. Just same thing as back home. Prices are probably about 50% off. But got a full kitchen here. I finally found my spatula. I found the utensils finally. I didn't have to call my Airbnb host.
Nice.
So here it's been pretty much business as usual as far as food goes.
Cool. I definitely see that with people who travel, and it's like again, in the exact same, it's analogous to what you would do with the training. You'd be like, hey, instead of like it being very specific, we're going to fall back on basic principles of like get a protein, get a veggie, get an entire loaf of bread and just fucking crush it. And so definitely similar, like fall back on basic principles when you're out of your like normal routine and shopping and your own gym and all that stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Yep.
Totally.
Cool. Let's move on to the next tweet. The next tweet is unfortunate truth. You may need to spend 1 to 2 months learning how to create a deficit. Losing weight is simple, not easy.
Yeah. The one no one wants to hear it. I mean, this falls in the foot. Like, this is me kind of pushing back at that research that says, it's good to get people some early wins on the scale or lose weight early just because it helps motivation. And I don't know if I'm right to say this, although, I mean, I've seen a lot of people lose weight slower than I want to, and no one ever complains. And I think getting through that, those periods where you aren't losing weight, figuring out how, or even just being patient enough to wait out the fact that maybe you did eat more on that long weekend where you kind of forgot about, just waiting long enough for the scale to go down and get pumped about the process again. I think if your motivation hinges on early success, I mean, at some point that's going to be challenged, and I don't think it bodes well for you. But I just think people need to take a problem-solving approach to this whole thing. That it's not just going to be this, this free ride just because you got a plan. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest problems out there is people, worry so much about diet and workout solutions, which are important, but they don't know how to follow it. And they follow it when it's convenient. They follow it Monday to Thursday when they probably already ate well anyway. But as soon as it gets inconvenient, they're trying, they're paying attention, but they're also like not paying attention and trying not to allow their usual life to feel that's inconveniencing them while they're chasing this goal. And it's just me pointing the fact that at some point, assuming you have more than 5 to 10 pounds to lose, and assuming you don't understand this process 100%, you've done it before, like you're going back to a shape you've been in, you're going to run into life. You're going to run into your old habits. You're going to, your friends are going to call you out, and if you aren't prepared to kind of like deal with some negative emotions around that and problem solve or be patient, you're probably going to quit and go try and find something else and then run into the same damn obstacle every single time like you usually do. But because we don't slow down and see that, we never actually see the problem. We just, define it by I'm not motivated, I'm bored, all these things that actually truthfully mean nothing. I mean, they do mean something, but they don't actually find the problem that people are running into, and they're just going to run into them again.
And I don't want to be anti getting progress early categorically, but I completely second that notion. I think if we look at the research that supports this idea that the people who lost weight in the first 4 weeks ended up sustaining the intervention for longer. That's like essentially what you'll see in this paper. It's like, it's like a 16-week intervention. And it's like, all right, the people who lost quicker early, like did better across the 16 weeks. They felt more motivated, whatever, but it's just 16 weeks. Like That's like 16 weeks of people probably being highly motivated, know they're being studied, like know that they're going to like abstain when in the long term, maybe they wouldn't. Like, I
Yeah.
don't care about that. That's not that lacks. I mean, it's thought provoking, and I don't think it's wholly inaccurate in all contexts, but
Yeah.
it doesn't extrapolate, doesn't have as much external validity in terms of like, what about
It's
16 years into the future? Like, you
yeah.
know,
To me, it confirms the bias that a lot of the fitness industry wants to hear. In that, let's justify the fad diet or the crash diet or the low calorie diet that I push on clients or customers in order to create a 4 8 week 12 16 week testimonial. Jane lost 12 pounds in 8 weeks, because we can continue to justify those approaches, which probably have some later fallouts. I agree with you totally. Yeah, it's I don't know. Look at some major successes in any field, and I'm sure those are actually defined by early struggles. And I think that's the difference between following fad diets, which provide us a really simple understanding of how to start and get results, but total confusion once our life interacts with the fact that we actually do want to eat carbohydrates or after 6 p.m. or we actually don't like eating under 100 grams of carbs every day. But if we understand what the few things we have to do in order to lose weight, just create a calorie deficit, however you want to do it, right? There's obviously more to it than that, but there aren't a lot of things we need to get right, which offers people so much flexibility in what they do. But finding out how you fit into that and how your life fits into that and how your psychology fits into that is probably not something you can figure out in 1 or 2 weeks. It's probably something that you're going to hit some roadblocks on. But if you're prepared for that and that's coming, then it's much easier to sit through it for a bit and just realize that, like, yeah, maybe you can't go out to eat 3 times a week and do whatever you want, and like maybe we shave that down to 2. And like because the difference between losing weight and not losing weight is actually quite small. The reactions that people make when they don't lose weight are actually catastrophic and massive. It's akin to sprinting a marathon when you're halfway through.
yeah, and I think that if you took the ketogenic diet and the several years, assuming we're on the tail end of that obsession, if you took out the physiology that is behind why you would lose so much weight so quickly, because lacking carbohydrates depletes glycogen, you lose water. Like if you took out that, the keto diet would not have picked up any steam at all. It only picks up steam because Karen loses 27 pounds in 13 days because half of that is water, and that is what has and then whatever, and then eventually Karen wants to eat a carbohydrate again, and then Karen feels like a failure, and then Karen does it again because she's like, oh yeah, I lost 27 pounds in 13 days. And the irony of that, like early success, if you strip that off of the keto diet, it probably doesn't pick up steam.
Well, I think that defines why it's the most popular diet, because like that's the one where, like, and we both know why. That's the one where you are going to lose the most weight in the first 5 to 7 days.
Yep.
And it's funny because in my first 12 days on this plan, I dropped 12 pounds. I was bloated when I started, and when I got to Colombia, it was my birthday, and the only thing I just due to going through airports and flights that offered no meals, the only thing I consumed that day was a bottle of wine that was the Airbnb. So I had like 500 calories of wine that day. So no food in me for like 36 hours, basically. So I'm down like 5 pounds as of the last weigh-in, and I'm down 12 pounds in 12 days. And I go put the picture up, and that is, of course, the most liked picture that was there, even though I looked depleted and like I hadn't eaten in a couple of days, whereas now it's less interesting. So it's just like you're fighting a losing fight trying to beat the scale, and how important that is for people. But that's part of the problem, I think.
There's a very practical thing that, okay, so if you're somebody who's out there, you're listening, you're like, I would like to lose some fat. I'm hearing these guys talk about maybe we're dancing around this idea that there's work to be done on the front end and during, but this idea that I need to rush into early progress as if that's some proxy or a predictor of greater success later. And so what I think, not the issue, but an issue might not even be the right word, is this idea of like hiring your coach. And one, it works on both ends. It's the communication from the coach to client. I'm going to ask you a direct question about it in a second, but there's also an expectation from the client end of things, who's like hiring the coach, thinking I'm hiring the coach to go through my cutting phase, as if that is the thing you're hiring your coach for. and it's going to be 12 weeks. I'm going to do my cut with this coach, and I'm going to invest a little bit of money. And I know that this bias, because this is what I do for a living as well. But like, stop hiring a coach just for your cut, and stop, like, I think just, I want to reframe the money that you're spending on this stuff. Like, I'm not assuming everyone's finances, but this is a real thing that you should take seriously, that you should at some point, if you want to invest at all, invest. I just want to increase the seriousness with which you view this investment. And so I want to ask you, like, I have my own rules with my own coaching in terms of like minimum time we're going to work together and structure of what we will and won't do. Do you have any of like, hey, minimum length of time coaching is this, because I just don't have any interest in you being like, yeah, let me hire you for 8 weeks? Or is that something that you talk about on a call, or how are you setting those expectations of like, we're going to do the real work?
Yeah, I say I'm 4 months. I've always been 4 months, and I'll tell them right away, this isn't really because I think you're going to get there in 4 months. I don't think I've ever had a client get there in their mind in 4 months, because even if they did, and it's substantial changes take typically 6, 8, 10, 12 months. And the thing is especially with the people who I've worked with long term, you'll have every now and then you'll have a client who just like, they're kind of just yours for life. In the situations where they've made their big change and then come out of it, the hardest thing, especially with women, this is the mind fuck that they deal with big time. That comes after the diet is, in almost every situation, if you lose 25 pounds and you get to where you want to go, you're not staying at 25 pounds down. I mean, you can do your damnedest to stay. You were 150, now you're 125. There is a very, very real chance you're not going to feel your best at 25 in terms of like living there. And that, again, if anyone's listening and so demoralized by that, the good news is, in every situation where I've come off a diet where they've, the client gets as lean as they want, and they look the way they want, they feel the way they want, they're in their clothes and all that type of stuff. We might add 3 pounds, 5 pounds, 7 pounds over the course of, say, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, something like that. We always do a picture comparison. And the client, and again, this is very important to understand, because this is where the coach probably is most important. The client hates every second of it. And they only hate it, and they hate it until they see the picture. So until they see the proof that the weight coming on and their clothes feeling tighter, which again, clothes feeling tighter is not a bad thing. It's just they've learned that it's a bad thing. Your clothes feeling a little bit tighter because you're just taking up a tiny bit more space. I mean, especially with women's clothes being a little bit tighter, any pound that comes on, whether a good pound or a bad pound, is going to be felt. So in every situation, they typically have a hard time with it. A very exception to the rule with the client just adds weight, and they're just like, okay. But then the tune shifts at about 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, or something like that, when they look exactly the same, but they do weigh 5, 6 pounds more, or something like that. And that's just because, like, a bit of glycogen, a bit of water comes on, in the short term. And then, and then we over the course of time, I mean, a bit of muscle comes on, maybe a little bit of fat, but you don't see it. And in every situation, also, the client also looks healthier. So the skin, there's just less of the skin just looks healthier. There's like more nutrients in there, it just makes sense. So all these good things happen. No bad things happen to the way they look. But in my opinion, as much as they needed help getting down to that, I would imagine that they probably needed more help with the reassurance. And I think reassurance is one of the biggest aspects of coaching, just making sure that they know, hey, no, you're doing it right. Because a lot of people quit when they're actually progressing. They needed it more coming out of the diet, because as soon as that tight feeling comes on after the diet, as soon as the scale goes up, whether it's a weight fluctuation that they now have to almost, like their psychology needs to wrap around that part again. But even if the scale continues to go up, because that's where they feel better, this all feels like bad things are happening. And without having their hand held through that process, I mean, I would hope better for people, but in a lot of cases, people just go right the other way. They're out of the gym. I can never stay in the shape. I don't believe it. I can't do it. I knew this was going to happen. And meanwhile, nothing bad is happening. And all good things are happening. Like Jane, if you keep doing this, your friends are all going to ask you how you got your toned arms, if you just keep going.
Yeah.
So,
and that's your, I say sometimes that, and I agree with what you said about like sometimes it's just like sometimes a coach is just the vehicle, and sometimes it's okay that like like your job is normalizing things sometimes and being that person in their life that affirms and validates and normalizes. And I'm not saying that you do that only, and I'm not saying that you do that when that isn't the thing you should be doing, but I'm saying, God, that's such an important thing for coaches to understand is like not everybody you're dealing with, and I'd go as far as say most people you're dealing with don't have people in their lives who do this, normalize, validate, affirm, and people that they view as subject matter experts, of which that validation and affirmation means more.
Yeah.
When people get to they finish a fat loss phase and they're X pounds, like just categorically, you're not remaining that much weight. Like this is you're not
No,
gaining no weight over the next year. There's no way. And
nor should you.
in the way that I usually see this, and I don't know how far I would take this, but I firmly believe what I'm about to say is that in most cases, even if you do everything right, in the context of quote doing everything right, transitioning back to maintenance calories, getting back to, and then by the way, let me just go on the record here. Maintenance calories means two things. One, it means an amount of calories in which your body weight is stabilized, but it also is an amount of calories where you feel good. And if you miss that second part, then the first part won't remain. You will not remain that body weight. You will. There are genetics that will push you over time back to a certain place. And so we need maintenance calories has two like necessary components. It's body weight is stable and you feel good. And I think what ends up happening is people at the end of a fat loss phase, the necessary or the weight that you will gain, it is an amount that you would never notice without the precision of the scale. And I find that that's sometimes so fascinating to me because, and it's not like, oh, you should get off the scale at this moment, or everyone should. I definitely have good experiences with that and times where that wasn't the best call, let's say. But the interesting thing is we're using such a precise tool that can measure down to the 10th of a pound, right? And if you were to take away that tool, you'd have to decide, because what do we use the scale for? We use the scale to tell us if whether or not what we're doing is working. And and it's a very precise tool, which is the benefit. That's the benefit. We can identify like small victories, week to week averages of a half pound. Like you can identify that because it's a very precise tool. But the downside of it being so precise is you're using it. It's like, what do people say the downside of tracking calories? People say when you track your calories, you lose touch with your hunger and satiety signaling. You start to eat to a number instead of eat to a sensation, let's say. And it's the same for the way you think about your body. There's a very big confounding variable about how you feel about your body. And the confounding variable is what you weigh. And if you didn't know that you had gained 2 pounds, 3 pounds, a half pound, 0.7 pounds, 4 pounds, like you'd have to generate the answer to the question of how do I feel without that piece of information. And you might come to a completely different conclusion without that information. And I think a lot of people are just categorically, very general statement, like giving a ton of power to an amount of pounds that they would not even know about if not for the precision of the scale. And I find that interesting. There are so many times with clients, especially at maintenance, when the goal is to have nothing happen anyway, where it's like you're putting yourself through hell through an amount of weight that you only even know about because the precision of the scale. And if it was not there, you'd come to an entirely different conclusion based on how I feel, my energy levels, my lifestyle, my enjoyment with my fitness, all of that stuff. And so I just feel like I'm not saying that when you track your calories, you lose all touch with satiety signaling. And I'm not saying when you weigh in, you lose all touch with every other input of how you feel, but I am saying it muddies the water a little bit.
Absolutely does. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think in a lot of cases, people just like have this idea that they're going to be, like they look up who they want to look like, their aspiration in terms of their body goals or whatever. And that person is, 5'6", 135. So when I get to 5'6", 135, that's where I'm happy. And that's, I mean, you talk to a client. If I talk to a client on a bad day, I go over and see what their body weight is. And I know that's a day where it's up. It's a 99.9% certainty. And, these types of things are, it's tough to get people away from that, but it's the nuance of using that tool is it's hard. It's important because if I was trying to lose weight with a scale, I mean, I could do it, but like I would be confused, like I'd be like I'd be in the dark, it'd be a guessing game. And I don't know outside of having a lot of weight to lose, but even then it's just like people don't know what they're doing. Like they don't have an intuition about am I eating the appropriate amounts? It's almost like you need that feedback. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword where you got to use it, but like you probably need some coaching with that thing or something.
Yeah, it's definitely a double-edged sword. I mean, it's an amazing tool and it's super helpful and it provides data, and then that data is like directly correlated with the goal that you have for sure.
Yeah.
But it's not your only goal. So that's definitely a big hurdle. I mean, I don't know if we'll ever get to a point where on a population level we all have a better relationship with that number, but I think that one of the things that I do feel like if I wanted to be a little bit less depressing about it and be a little bit more optimistic about it, is that like something about like we're in the glute era right now. We're in like the booty gain era, heavy booty gain era. And one thing I will say though is that is just we're coming out of like the CrossFit era, and I'm not saying CrossFit's not big, but it's not new anymore. And CrossFit athletes looking a certain way is not like this new thing. Everyone is aware of this now. So CrossFit chicks and the booty era are like coming back to back, and I think it has shifted very gently the perspective, again, on a population level, not like obviously you're dealing with individuals here, but like very gently shifted the idea of like, oh yeah, okay, maybe there's like that if I want either of these things, more muscles, like grow my glutes, like both of those are counter to weight loss. And so it is, I think we're just very gently, it's been a good thing. I know some people are like, why is everyone so obsessed with glutes? Why is everyone okay? Whatever. You know what it is? It's putting a barbell in people's hands. It's having them lift heavier weights. It's having them, reframe the idea of being a certain body weight or gaining or losing weight. And so I'm appreciative of that.
For sure. Yeah. The biggest problem we have is that people now want to do both at the same time.
Yeah. Now we have to reconcile that for sure. But it's probably a net positive outcome of like, I can't be 112 pounds with like, other than, you fly down, get some sort of surgery done, come back up here. Yeah. So yeah.
100%.
Cool. We're coming up on the hour. I want to be respectful of your time. It's been super duper fun. It was great to chat. You are a very insightful coach. I definitely think that. And so I appreciate you letting me kind of reread back some tweets, which I thought were fair. I didn't come, we didn't do all the racist ones. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Just kidding. Everyone chill. Yeah. No, I'm kidding.
That's a lit.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great way to go about it. Thanks for having me on, man.
Thanks, man.
It's been good to finally doing this.
Yep. Drop all your stuff, just like where you're most active these days and how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah, mostly Instagram, Chad Hargrove 1 at Chad Hargrove 1, and hopefully more TikTok these days. But that's about it for now.
How you doing on the talk? How's mental health?
Yeah. Just man, it's a lot over there.
You're big on TikTok, no?
Well, I mean, it's a big follower count, but I got 100,000 followers in one post, which was I don't know if you know Dr. Ids or Dr. Ides. Yeah. Yep. He, I duetted one of his posts, it was like a psych out post. So he was like, he went through a bunch of myths, and then so all the followers you get that, because at the start of the post he goes, follow me. So I got a bunch of followers from it, but it was all people who believed the myths.
Yeah.
So it was a bunch of followers that you didn't want.
Yeah, that's bad funny.
But it's all. I mean, it's all good. Are we still recording right now?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
Right? How honest can I be about it?
No, but it's all gotten harder these days, I think. I mean, Instagram's gotten. I mean, over the past couple of months, I was like in and out last year, but it's changed, and I think TikTok's changed a little bit too. So. The glory days are seemingly coming to an end or something.
No, that is for damn sure. That's certainly true. Yeah. Cool, man. If you don't follow Chad, give him a follow. Definitely a good person that you'll get a lot of those moments. You're like, oh, like he's definitely in my head. So I like that a lot about your content.
Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, man.
See you guys.